Welcome to The View, where recruitment, marketing and society comes together.
Hello and welcome to The View. This week I'm speaking with Matt Howe from BT Group. Matt is Head of Volume Recruitment for brands that include BT, EE, Plusnet and Openreach. He hires thousands of people each year. Has really interesting insights into what that takes from a people, process and technology point of view. So let's dive in and hear what Matt has to say. Absolutely delighted to be chatting with Matt Howe, who's Head of Volume Recruitment at BT. Of course, everybody here has heard of BT and EE and Plusnet. You might not all know that it's all part of the BT Group. So Matt, before we get going, why don't you tell us a little bit about your role there at BT Group and what you do?
Yeah, hi Neil, thanks for having me. So I look after volume recruitment across BT Group. So that generally consists of anything that is considered frontline, so contact centres, retail stores, Openreach engineers, also includes early careers, so graduates and apprentices, and then pretty much anything we recruit on a high volume campaign basis. So that could be internal reskilling, it could be temporary to permanent moves for BT colleagues, can be a whole manner of things.
Okay, and obviously, you know, we all know BT is a big company. So what does volume look like? You know, how many roles are you hiring? How many applications do you get? What does that look like? What is volume for you?
It can be in a year. It can be anything from around about 6,500 to about 11,500, 12,000. So typically, we hire around about 3,500 to 4,500 people in our call centre every year in our call centres. About 1,500 into our retail stores. We do an early careers kind of run of graduates and apprentices, typically of about 500 people, although that varies. And then our Openreach side of the business is currently quite quiet in terms of hiring. So we're doing about 500 hires a year, but that can ramp up to 5,000 when we're doing the fibre build, growing the fibre build. So yeah, it varies a bit.
So the Openreach engineers, these are the people out in the vans, going up poles, linking up homes, actually connecting people to the internet.
That's it. Yes, exactly that.
Okay, so I mean, it's quite a varied role with call center, frontline sales, grads, early careers, engineers. What was your journey to get to this point? You know, what's your recruitment career looked like, and what have the steps been to get you to this role?
Yeah, so probably like 99% of the recruiters that I know, I didn't know anything about recruitment until I joined recruitment, and even then I wasn't sure I wanted to do it. Worked for a recruitment agency in Sheffield for a year, decided I wanted to move in-house, and very randomly applied for a job at Plusnet, which was just around the corner from where I worked. Very lucky to get that role at Plusnet. Did generally hiring into technical roles and marketing and finance roles, so corporate style hiring, and then worked my way up from there. So I went from being a recruiter to being the recruitment manager within Plusnet. Took on the volume hiring in Plusnet, so the call centres there, and then in 2019 took the jump into BT Group to take on contact centre recruitment for EE, BT and Plusnet, and then since then took on the wider volume recruitment role.
Right. So I mean, you've really seen a mixture of brands, geography, different kinds of roles, and I guess Plusnet was a relatively small organisation when you joined, and obviously BT and EE coming together is a huge organisation. So quite the journey there of organisations at different sizes. What do you think are the principal differences between sort of a small scaling organisation versus a really big organisation? What are the key differences that you see there in recruitment?
Yeah, I think it's culture. It's culture and speed of requirements is quite often the case. In Plusnet, we worked often very, very short notice and were able to turn things around quickly, but you weren't steering a it was two sites. It wasn't 30 odd contact centers like we have now, for instance, or 400 stores. You can be much more agile and dynamic in the way you do things. As it gets bigger, obviously, to be able to do things well, it takes a little bit longer, but the trick for us is shortening that down and still keeping it as agile as possible. The other part of it is the risk involved. If we got something wrong in Plusnet, smaller impact. If I get something wrong across BT Group, it has a much bigger volume of impact, but also a very big political impact. So we have to be a little bit more cautious about how we make our decisions.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. So I'd imagine, more compliance, more stakeholders, more sign off, more reporting, that sort of thing. And as a recruiter, does that, do you find that an administrative burden that slows you down, or is it sort of a helpful thing that keeps the projects going? How does that work for you?
I think when I first moved across into wider BT Group, I did find there was more red tape that stopped you achieving what you needed to achieve. I think this is the job of a manager in these positions, is to embrace what's required, but remove anything unnecessary. And that's probably where we are now, where we recruit with limitations in terms of how we can do things and the speed at which we can do it, but they are the minimum limitations that we can go for. So I think often lots of large organizations use that as an excuse for not pushing themselves a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So, I mean, I guess the obvious question is, you're hiring what, 5 to 10,000 people. How do you go about doing, managing recruitment on that sort of scale? What are the building blocks?
It really helps when you've got a brilliant team behind you, to be honest, of experts. So that's the first bit. I think when a senior director in this business once said to me, "Your job's easy, Matt, when you get the right people working in your team." So that's probably number one. But I think overall, this is about data. So anything we do in volume recruitment, although I would argue applies to any form of recruitment, is around data. So essentially, we need to know the volumes of applicants we require. We need to know what sources are delivering those volumes and the best quality. We then need to know our conversion rates throughout, and we need to optimize that journey. If you have the data, what you can quickly work out what decisions you need to take. Often in recruitment, I think people work quite blind, and they work off how they're feeling towards the recruitment rather than what the facts are saying.
That's really interesting, and I think I have a suspicion it links to a point where I often meet recruiters who perhaps feel undervalued in the organization, and that they don't have the seat at the senior table they think they should. And then when you ask them about what quality and timeliness of data they have, often that's missing. And I'm convinced those two things come together in that businesses are numbers driven. Leadership is over-indexed by financially savvy people, and therefore if you go in there with sort of gut feel and stories and anecdotes, you quickly get sort of devalued, perhaps, in that you're not talking the language of finance and data. What's your experience been of that in a big organization?
Yeah, look, it 100% is the case. I mean, I'm very lucky in that I work with stakeholders who are managing hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of customer interactions every year. They are very used to working with data and making data-led decisions. And they're also very used to putting the person at the heart of that data-led decision, if that makes sense. Although it can seem like a bit of a dichotomy. Actually, they're brilliant at doing that. Lots of recruiters, exactly like you say, or recruitment functions will lean towards because it's what we should be doing, not because it's what will work. Now, often they are right in what they're saying. They're just not, kind of not always evidence in it. So I think it's a good way to work. It's business stakeholders who want to hear that data and see that data. They're actually really easy to work with, because if you check it and it's right, it will be an easy conversation.
Okay. So one thing you said there I thought was really interesting about how you make data-driven decisions, but you keep the customer at the heart of the process. So can you give me an example of, in your life, how you bring those two things together, perhaps keeping the candidate at the center of it, but using data-driven decisions?
Yeah, exactly. I think a really good, there's a couple of really good examples. The first one I'd say is around how we do our selection processes. So if I take a good example, in a contact center, there's a lot of data around group exercises, individual exercises, whether you bring people in together or whether you bring people in individually.
Yeah.
The data, the kind of data would lead you to bring everyone in together quite often and
Yeah.
administer a one size fits all exercise.
Yeah.
It's efficient for time. It leads to consistent decision making. However, what I tend to do and what my team tend to do is go and sit in with new starter groups regularly and talk to them after we have trialed new ways of selecting people.
Yeah.
And what you then find is, I can think exactly where we've removed the group assessments that we do. And a neurodiverse candidate told us the reason she felt comfortable to come to the interview was because we told her we weren't doing a group exercise.
Right.
And you wouldn't, whilst you wouldn't necessarily see that in a data set, but they're the ones that reinforce your decisions to then go and look at, actually, this is what's working for people. How do we then make it work?
That's really interesting. So, I mean, I think BT's been well recognised as a leader in equality, diversity and inclusion for quite a long time. So that's a really nice example of sort of being flexible in the process. How do you get that balance right between the volume of hires you need to make versus being that inclusive employer who is offering equity, and you're able to find those candidates from different backgrounds with different experiences? How do you get that balance right?
Yeah, I think overall, I would say it's impossible to get it right for everyone at all the time. So I think no matter what employers do, there's always a challenge to do more. Absolutely, a challenge to do more. However, I think there's two methods that we use to try and do the best we can. The first one is we segment our attraction and selection. We segment the people we're trying to hire. For instance, a couple of years ago, we reintroduced apprentices into our contact centres. So we did that because we noticed coming out of the pandemic, 16 to 24-year-olds had the highest rate of unemployment. However, when they were coming in for our roles, they were either really struggling to pass our assessment, or when they joined, they were being really unsuccessful and leaving very quickly because they were missing general life skills, bearing in mind they'd been probably the heaviest impacted under COVID.
Yeah.
So we decided to put an apprenticeship in place, which provided a lot of this kind of life skills, work skills, as well as academic learning where they've missed out and learning on the job. However, to do that, we changed the way we attracted. We stopped online advertising for that, and we did it through kind of local networks. Yeah. And we changed the way we selected people. So instead of bringing people in for an interview where we knew nerves would often take over, and people didn't have any real experience to fall back on to kind of quote to us, we provided a day of getting to know us and learning. And then at the end of that, if you attended it and you enjoyed it, you were guaranteed an interview, and then we would only assess you on what we taught you that day. So what we found off the back of that for that specific population was much higher pass rates, much lower attrition, much lower absence, much better performance for that population. So we segment to that. We do that for the different demographics. Yeah. The other thing that we do try to do is we automate as much as we can. And that's really important when dealing with kind of, just in our contact centers and retail stores, we're probably at 120 to 140,000 applications a year. So you automate as much as you can, and you make that as good as you can. But there always has to be a chance for somebody to speak to you. Yeah. So most of the time, a candidate won't want that outside of the normal route. But if somebody's applying and they can't work out our online journey, there needs to be a way for and somebody they can speak to and relate to. Yeah. And for different populations, you need to be a bit more, bring that in up front. I'm just recently learning around some of the work we're doing for the older trying to hire an older demographic that actually typically before they fill in an application form, they want to talk to you. Yeah. Whereas younger demographic, very much generalizing here, will be very comfortable to have their first interactions with you online. Yeah. Just a difference there. So we always try and get it right for the different people.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. And it's that whole balance, isn't it, between you have to be efficient, you want to use technology because, businesses are always looking to do more with less, but at the same time that, keeping the candidate experience in the center and being flexible for those people is critical. And certainly I think, in recruitment, so much of the role is around creating that human link, that emotional connection, particularly where candidates are applying for several different organizations at once. If we all automate everything to within an inch of its life, it's a pretty low involvement interaction for the candidate, potentially easy for them to drop out and go somewhere else where they feel more connected to the organization.
Yeah, agree. We know before somebody has spoken with us directly, as in spoken to somebody in BT Group, their dropout rate is much higher than after they've interacted with us. So if I think back, even before the pandemic, we used to outsource our phone screening. So you work with a third party on that. We found massive value in bringing that in-house. Now, we work on a large scale, so it's financially worthwhile for us to do that. But we noticed a huge increase in people who were carrying on their journey because they'd spoken to somebody at the company who had lived experience of working here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds like it sounds like you've got the data. It sounds like you've got the resource. You've got the organizational knowledge and wisdom. You've clearly got a culture of improvement, and the desire to do things in like the right way, an ED&I way. So it all sounds kind of rosy. What are the challenges that you face? There must be some stuff that grinds your teeth and you see missed opportunities. Where do you think you can improve and go from here?
Oh my goodness! I'm pleased my boss isn't on this call right now. I think there's so much opportunity for us at the moment. It's focused around quality of hire. I'm not sure whether that's probably the right term, but the biggest challenge in a kind of a frontline space at the moment is around attrition of people when they join. I think pre-COVID, I would say we were in a very good place here. Since then, the job market and the socioeconomic status of the country has changed, and it's meant that people joining our roles will often not stop as long, and they expect different. And they expect a different journey. And I think just like most employers, we're wrestling with that a lot at the moment. So a big focus for us is not to attract more, it's to be really clear on who we're attracting and why we are right for them. And then making sure we're giving them a brilliant experience throughout their journey. Now, we do some brilliant stuff there, but on scale, we can be doing a lot more. And then really select the key elements that are going to make somebody successful. And I think that is the bit that I have not yet seen an answer for in a frontline space where you don't select based on previous experience. So that is a real challenge for us at the moment. Interesting.
And sort of think back to all the sort of events, debates, and articles about how the pandemic has changed recruitment, and what does post-pandemic recruitment look like. It sounds like you're, as other organizations are, seeing some real differences there in terms of people's economic outlook and their desires. Do you see that around sort of people are demanding more flexible working, or is it that they're less emotionally attached to their employer because they think life is short because of perhaps personal experience of loved ones dying? What do you think's changed?
Well, I think first of all, it's easier to get a job. So whilst the job market is cooling, there are still more job vacancies than pre-pandemic, and still less people out there searching for roles. So it is still very much candidate-driven market. Therefore, if you don't like what you see, you can go somewhere else. The other thing is that throughout the pandemic, the wages increased, so the cost of living crisis has hit everyone, and now there is less difference in entry-level pay. So again, you don't have that quite big difference that you would have had 3 or 4 years ago for the different types of roles. So that has really squeezed the labour force, I think. And the other side of it is, I think people have come out of the pandemic and are less attached to a job or a company, and have had a different life as well. So I think it's impacted different people in different ways. And nobody yet has quite found the answer, and whether we will again, I'm not sure, but I'm sure we'll make our best go at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as with all these things, you're challenged with those external factors that are out there in the market and the culture. You're trying to deliver on a ED&I agenda and make the candidate experience the best that you can. How do you sort of look at that candidate experience in the context of everything else, and what do you aim to do to constantly keep that right at the forefront?
I think on how we look at it is you can no longer have the power as an employer. That I do think pre-pandemic a lot of companies believed that people should want to come and work here.
Yeah, employer complacency. I've sort of heard that term where, well, of course they should come and want to work for us. Aren't we an amazing company?
Exactly that, and don't forget, BT Group is a very old company, an ex-public sector business, and there is a lot of that kind of old school thinking in BT Group in pockets. Much different now to even when I first came across in kind of 2019. It's much improved, but you wrestle with that with bearing in mind people would have joined here 30, 40 years ago when that was the case.
Yeah.
So I think from a candidate experience point of view, you have to provide now what the candidate expects, and that varies person to person, and we need to play on what's important to the type of people we are trying to hire, or the demographics we're trying to hire. We need to think more about your ways of working, so your flexibility and how we talk about that and how we offer it. We need to think a lot about sustainability, which probably wasn't really a big topic a few years ago. We need to think about how we show up on the diversity and inclusion front, political topics. Everything we do needs to complement the type of people we're trying to hire, right? So I think it's now less about put an advert up, make sure that advert's attractive, and bring people in. It's now about a full experience for a candidate.
Really interesting. And in terms of those candidates, how do you go about making the process inclusive for all candidates? And does technology play a role there at all? How do you make sure that your experience is delivering an equal opportunity for people?
Yeah. So I take it back to an original answer on its data. Yep. So the main way we track here is we look at do our applications match the local demographics. So we take ONS data, depending on the type of role that we're hiring for, will depend on how wide we spread that. Do our applications meet 50-50 gender? Because generally a location will be 50-50. Do they match the local demographics on ethnicity? Do they match the local demographics on different abilities? They're generally the three we look at, although we do look at other elements as well. If your applications match those, you take it right to the end of the process, and then look at does your percentage of hires match your applications, and if not, why not? So did you cause adverse impact through something? Sometimes that's unavoidable. So in certain areas, we definitely have a challenge around we attract really strong people from a non-white ethnicity, but they will be international students centered around the university, and some of our hiring won't allow them to work because it won't be 20-hour shifts that they can work on student visas. But then we're very cognizant of solutions we can put in place, so part-time student appropriate shifts to help address that. And then sometimes you've just got bias in your process that you need to deal with. So it all comes back to the data there. I think technology then becomes part of your solution, but only when you understand your problem.
That sounds like very wise words. I think there's that people, process, and technology needs to come together, and you can very rarely use technology to fix a problem or process to fix, or it's always a combination of the three. But I think, really clearly understanding the problem first through data leads to that proper data-led decision, which sounds like that's really successful for you in terms of getting senior management buy-in and having the right level of conversation for strategic talent leaders, which is exactly where you are. So that's where you are. And any sort of tips you would give perhaps a smaller organization, perhaps they've got a few hundred heading towards 1,000 staff, perhaps they've only got 1, 2 or 3 people in TA, and they're perhaps a bit tactical, perhaps a bit reactive. How do they make those steps towards this sort of strategic talent function that you have at BT?
Yeah. So I think the first place you start in any form of recruitment is understanding what you want to achieve. So as a business, who are you and who do you want to be? That will then lead you to who you need to hire and why. I think quite often we build, and I've been guilty of this many times in my earlier career, is you build a recruitment process based on the recruitment process rather than the person you're trying to recruit. So I think it's all a case of understanding what you want to achieve and which people you need to hire to get you there. Once, I think that goes for a business of any size. Once you've got that, I think that it then becomes quite straightforward in terms of what you need to do. There are, thinking from a smaller business perspective, there's quite a lot of advantage of working with external partners in this space. An external partner should bring expertise to you. They should bring market knowledge. They should bring scalability. So again, in a very fortunate place in BT Group, where because we deliver so much, it's economically viable for a large team in TA. However, sometimes when you're in a smaller business, certainly when I was in Plusnet, we had to work with very closely with external partners on this. The key there is select good external partners. There are a lot of there's a lot of work going on in that space by people who aren't experts selling that they are. So I think really take your time to pick your partners and make sure they are true partnerships to you, not providers, if that makes sense. So if you pick those people correctly, whether that be a tech company that's supplying you with technology to help, whether it's a recruitment agency, anything like that, make sure they are going after what you need them to go after.
Love that. Matt, I wanted to finish off with a couple sort of more general questions around constant debate in the media and in the industry at the moment about the right balance between flexible working from home, being back in the office, presenteeism, trust and control, all that sort of stuff. I used to work at BT. They were famously early to adopt technology, flexible working, which I found to be hugely useful in my career. What do you think the picture is out there at the moment with, what's the right amount of time to be in the office? What are the pros and cons? What are your thoughts?
What a wide question.
Sorry, that's a bit thick, isn't it?
Look, I think on this, it depends on what you want, what you're looking to achieve and who with. So it will always be different for every organization. I don't think there is a wrong or a right answer. However, I think in general, hybrid will generally work better than fully remote, in my opinion. Again, not for everyone, not for every company and not in every situation, but generally people coming together to interact will drive better customer outcomes, I think, in principle. How much? I think quite often we're governed by rules, as in we need it to be, 2 days in the office a week, 5 days a month. The people who get this right, I think, will have this in a place where there'll be some guidance around how much, because that's what on average works. But really what governs how much is the quality of the work you do when you're together, and the value it delivers to your employees and your customers. And I think then what you'll find is in some industries that will bring people together most of the time, and in others that will bring people together a lot less, but the benefit will be there. So I think the problem is that the media are hyping this one up big time. And it's interesting that the debate is around, leaning on CEOs who are saying that their employees have to come back to the office and that it's never going to work and they're not employee centric. And it's not the other way around on the CEOs who are shutting all their offices to save money and making everyone work from home. It's interesting how the media's had a certain take on it. I just think there's a place in the middle where there'll be enough fully remote options for people who want to be fully remote. There'll be enough fully in-office options for people who want to be fully, and the majority of people end up somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. A sensible nuance, a complex issue. It's not a black and white answer. Love it. And I guess the last sort of general question from me, really. BT's CEO was recently talking about AI and the impact that's going to have in recruitment. You know, I think a lot of companies worldwide are thinking that there's options here for less recruitment. What are you seeing early evidence of that? And what are your thoughts on that? You know, how that will impact volume recruitment for you?
Yeah. Look, I think on this one, AI will just change the nature of the jobs, right? I think it changes the nature of what people will do, change the training required for people when they join, or even reskilling. So that will definitely change who we hire, how we hire people. I think through the recruitment journey, some people will use technology and AI to talk to candidates less and save money. Others will use it. The people who get it right will use it to improve the conversations you have with people.
Yeah.
So the idea for me is that just like a contact center or any customer interaction, if a candidate wants to self-serve, we should enable them to do that over the channel they want to do. And naturally, that is happening more and more. And companies are still finding a way to deliver that as a good solution to candidates. But when they don't, or when they need to talk to you, what that AI is doing is freeing up your capacity to have a good conversation quickly with people. So no longer do we have to answer every email if we've got a chatbot, for instance. So I think where companies embrace it as a way to add to the candidate experience, it will make things amazing. Where it's just seen as a one-time spend and then you can cut your resource down, that is probably where it's going to go wrong. Yeah.
Amen to that. Completely agree with you. Matt, that's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom. Some really good stuff there. I'm sure we'll get some follow-up questions. So Matt Howe from BT, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Neil.
Cheers.
My thanks to Matt Howe, who's Head of Volume Recruitment at BT, shared some really interesting stuff with us there about how one of the UK's best known organisations recruits at scale. Thanks for joining us. You can find out more about other episodes and sign up for notifications for when we have new episodes coming out at tribepad.com/theview, and we look forward to seeing you next time.